The celebrity Kim Kardashian once flew in her private jet all the way from LA to Paris just because she wanted this one cheesecake from a specific French hotel and then flew home. Here in the city of Kalamunda, instead of a French dessert, our ratepayers are dining out on a cost of living crisis. The Bureau of Statistics has reported that all living cost indexes have risen substantially over the last 12 months. Increases to the costs of insurances, groceries, interest rates have all been hitting our households hard. This was the unanimous theme of the submissions made on this agenda item tonight, and I completely agree with those submissions. As this is my first budget as a councillor, I've come into this with no expectations. However, I would have thought a city budget should be managed much like a household budget. We should be careful with our spending, we should try to maximise our income, and we should put a little bit away here and there into a bucket so that it can grow for the future. So how big is our bucket now? Well, let me ask you, councillors, out of all the income the city receives, what proportion do you think is reasonable that we receive from the city's investments? 10%? 25%? Maybe 30% if we've been a bit savvy over the years? Well, you can imagine my horror when it was shown to me that income from investments is less than 2%. So where does our money come from? Well, I'm sure it's no surprise that $9 out of every 10 we earn each year comes directly from the hip pocket of our ratepayer families. $9 in every 10. For as long as the city of Kalamunda has existed, decades upon decades of money from our ratepayers, in terms of revenue from investments, we've nothing to show for it. Now, it's important to make the point the city isn't broke. Not by a long shot. We can afford to pay our bills, but the point is, if we ever want more money to do anything, the only way to do it is by increasing our rates and increasing our fees on families, which is why we keep doing it year after year. The logical next question the public might ask is, well, David, how? Why is it that we've been put into such a position? And from my understanding, there's a few issues at play. Firstly, our city is situated in a marginal seat, both at state and federal level. For the benefit of those watching, that means that our seat is sometimes Labor and it's sometimes Liberal, and we can influence who is the government of the day. The major political parties don't want to spend money on a seat that they can never win and they can never lose, so they spend big ribbon-cutting bucks on places like the city of Kalamunda. But hang on, I hear you say, free money. How's that a bad thing? Well, once the politicians are done cutting their ribbons, they hand over the keys to the city of Kalamunda and say, here you go, this is your building now. Don't worry, it only costs a couple of $100,000 to maintain, maybe 20% more if you're suffering a labour shortage and supply chain constraints, but you'll be right. Constantly maintaining our assets while we try to build new ones when it's so expensive to do so is exactly why we keep raising rates. Our city costs go up and up and up, and because we don't have any investments to offset these costs, the only way we can pay is by pushing rates up and up and up. Our council's problem is we don't learn this lesson, and we keep going back time and time again, asking for more money, for more projects, and we build up even more the list of items that we can only maintain, again, by hitting the hip pockets of our city's families. However, this budget is different, and I applaud the city for a budget focused on fulfilling our previous promises instead of adding to the list a whole raft of new ones. Basic maths says that cost of living crisis plus costs blowouts for labour and materials equals now is not a good time to build more stuff. And with no relief for those costs in sight, I implore the council to consider carefully what funding we apply for and accept in future. The other issue I wanted to raise affecting our rates is not one isolated to the city of Kalamunda. Local governments across our country have, in my view, been sticking their fingers in pies where they don't belong. And every time we stick a new finger in a new pie, we use our limited ratepayer funds to do it. Climate change is one of the biggest issues currently affecting our planet. It is a serious international issue and it needs government attention. But we, in the city of Kalamunda, simply cannot be so naive or so self-important to think that we can solve the global issue of climate change from our 3 postcodes. And the evidence shows that despite the need for action, this transition to net zero by 2050 is a delusion. Don't take my word for it. Look at the recent essay of eminent Canadian scientist Vaclav Smil. Because we signed the Kyoto Protocol on climate change in 1997 as a nation, and in the 26 years and trillions of dollars since then, the world's entire fossil fuel consumption in absolute terms has actually increased by 55%. Meanwhile, in Kalamunda, we spent nearly $220,000 on tree planting last financial year. And this year, we're bragging about buying a couple of expensive EVs. Are we actually kidding ourselves? Most local governments, including Kalamunda, have taken their eyes off the core business of local government and are instead being hijacked by an environmental agenda which declares war on our own ratepayers, and it's the city's families suffering all the losses. And this hijacking continues to do its damage. Last month it was reported SPC, you know, the mob that they sell tinned Australian fruits. They told farmers to pull out their pear trees because Woolies are now paying half as much for canned pears from Argentina, a country suffering a 57% poverty rate. These pears are flown to Thailand for processing, a country run exclusively on cheap coal and gas. They're shipped to Australia, trucked to our markets, and after all that, it's still become cheaper than canning our own damn fruit. The environmental agenda thinks they can control things under this illusion of playing our part. It's time some of them got their head out of the canopy and come back down to earth. The worst part is that this city is drinking the same climate Kool-Aid. To think that by planting a few trees, buying a few EVs and writing some words on a piece of paper with a fancy title like Urban Forest Strategy or Climate Change Action Plan is in any way going to make any material difference to the global economy or indeed the level of carbon emissions itself is fanciful. And frankly, I think it's reckless to the ratepayers of the city. We are a local government. Our wheelhouse is roads, rubbish, and a few key services to the community. It's not environmental change. It's not social change. That's not the job of the City of Kalamunda ratepayers. It's the job of the people with the real money and power, the state and federal governments and the UN. And just maybe if we stop trying to effect this global crusade from our little corner of the planet, who knows? Maybe we might actually invest some money so one day we don't have to hit our ratepayers' families to go on these little crusades. With all that said, I applaud this budget. It's a good first step. All long journeys begin with just one step, and we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. But I'm prepared to roll up my sleeves and cop the work, and I hope you all are too, because as councillors, that's the least we owe our ratepayers. What I won't cop is $9 out of every 10 coming from the pockets of our families when they can least afford it, and while all they're doing is compensating the carbon emissions for Kim Kardashian to eat a French dessert in her private jet. Councillors, let's get to work.